Hey guys, Sko here, and in this video I'm going to answer which tank is best for progress rating in the new patch 7.2.5. Keep in mind that as always this is an opinion piece, and so it's okay to agree or disagree with what I'm saying. Historically guys, the tank balance in Legion hasn't been great, and there's been some pretty big gaps between certain tanks in terms of their viability when it comes to endgame progress rating. Blizzard have tried to close this gap with more recent patches, but they have never quite hit the nail on the head. So if we look at like a picture extract from my previous tank ranking videos, this will give you an idea as to how the balance was up until this point. You can see that pre 7.1.5, the tanks had quite a big disparity between the balance. With 7.1.5, the tanks all kind of came closer together. But there was still obviously massive gaps. You can see obviously that Druid versus Death Knight would have made a huge difference for progress rating guilds. But yeah, certain tanks such as Guardian Druids, they've simply remained too strong, to be honest. I mean, to even consider playing almost any other tank. I mean, if we look at the stats collected on Reddit for Nighthold, of the top 30 guilds to finish, 36 of the tanks were Guardian Druids, and Monk came in second with 11. So you guys can see a huge gap there. So clearly there is like an ongoing problem with progress rating tank balance, and basically has Blizzard managed to fix this with patch 7.2.5. So let's have a look at the patch notes from a high level. The following is clear. Basically, Death Knight, Demon Hunter, and to a very small extent Warrior, these three tank classes have been buffed, which if you looked at the previous picture you'd be thinking, yeah, that probably makes sense. Neutral is Paladin, you know, it's neither been buffed or nerfed really, it's staying the same. We've got some gameplay changes on Monk, so again, I haven't really put that in a buff or a nerf, it's just on the gameplay changes. And finally, you've got one tank that's been nerfed, and quite rightly so in my opinion, even though I am a player of the Druid myself, Druid has been nerfed. So how have these current buffs and nerfs changed the tanking landscape for progress rating in Tomb of Sargeras? I've decided to answer this question by, again, splitting the tanks into 4 different tiers. So let's get straight into it. The first tank in the bottom tier, tier 4, is the Protection Warrior. Feels bad, man. I feel as if Blizzard is trying to suggest an alternate build to Warrior for progress rating, moving away from Devastator to Indomitable, and then taking Booming Voice and anger management rather than, for example, Vengeance and Heavy Repercussions. This could be an interesting approach, and I am kind of slightly optimistic as to how it's going to work out. It's made even more interesting if, as a warrior, you can actually get your hands on the new Legendary Ring, which gives you Vengeance as a baseline talent. Because what that is going to do is it's going to free up even further rage for Ignore Pain usage. So with all these factors combined to maximize rage for Ignore Pain, and with 3 stacked Ignore Pain relics, then perhaps warrior could be a viable option, and it is definitely something interesting to think about. However, in saying all that, I kind of just also explained one of the main issues with the warrior tank right now, and this is plagued it ever since the gameplay was redesigned in 7.1.5, and that is the issue of warrior being stuck kind of between 2 talent builds. It predominantly comes down to the choice a warrior has to make between either picking Devastator or picking Indomitable. And the problem is that to some extent, a warrior really needs both of these talents to be viable in a progress rating scenario. Devastator is the normal optimization of the two, but with this talent, a warrior is just too vulnerable when it comes to progress rating. When you're undergeared, taking on some of the game's most challenging encounters, that's when you can really feel it. With Devastator, a good geared warrior will be sitting at around 6 million HP, and is extremely reliant on keeping a high tempo up throughout the fight in terms of rage generation, and basically, Ignore Pains are consumed extremely fast. And if the tempo slows down, a warrior is quickly left quite vulnerable and simply just can't keep up. In a lot of ways, it feels like you're playing a bit of a glass cannon when playing warrior. The gameplay is fast, the damage is good, the mobility is good, but the tables can just quickly turn against you. And especially when it comes to progression encounters, like I mentioned, when you're kind of undergeared, the fights are extremely hard, and the Ignore Pains are just getting chewed up so fast. We just have an instance really where the warrior just can't really keep up. I mean, it's not great. I mean, it's also worth noting, by the way, guys, this is completely, kind of a little bit off topic, but Blizzard have actually nerfed the Warrior's Nighthold 2-set bonus from 20% critical block. They've nerfed that down to 10%. This is obviously an attempt to make sure that not every single warrior in the game is going to be entering Tomb with the 2-set bonus, because that would have been quite strong. So yeah, guys, Warrior is down at tier 4, unfortunately. And I've come up with some pros and cons for that. The second tank in the bottom tier, guys, surprise, surprise again, is the Demon Hunter. And the Demon Hunter is actually getting quite a few buffs. Damage is getting a big buff with a 15% increase. And some of this will also translate into more self-healing, which is always really welcome. And overall, I have to say that I actually quite like Demon Hunter tank. It's actually relatively fun to play. It's simple to play. Has a ton of passive damage reduction, good mobility, decent active mitigation system through demon spikes and obviously empower wards for magic damage. And also metamorphosis procs through the Fueled by Pain artifact trait. They just make you feel like a god tank, obviously, for a short period of time with all that extra armor and HP. However, the procs are obviously pretty much uncontrollable, and so they have a high potential of being somewhat wasted. The random element of procs combined with the Demon Hunter style of play, including a somewhat reactive element of healing up damage taken through soul cleaving fragments, I would say are among the class's pitfalls. And when it comes to progress rating, you have a heavy reliance on proactive elements and the removal of any randomness to perform consistently across multiple pools. I would say that defensive cooldown wise as well, I wouldn't say that Demon Hunters are at the top of the tank options, but at the same time I wouldn't say they were lacking per se. I guess if I could just sum up my thoughts on Demon Hunter tanks as generally being a jack of all trades but really a master of none. It is a tank that I would heavily recommend to people who are just getting into tanking though, because it is relatively strong and it is relatively simple to play because of all the passive damage reduction, easy to use active mitigation system. So I mean, Demon Hunter is, yeah, it is where it is. It's kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, I still quite like the tank itself. So, without further ado, let's move up to tier 3, guys. We have Protection Paladin, and pretty much nothing has changed in regards to class balance in the latest patch. It's actually a pretty good thing, as Paladin was almost a top contender in Nighthold, and Paladin continues to scale extremely well with gear, which arguably puts them in an even better position than they were in a Nighthold. And especially when you consider the Tomb of Sargeras set bonuses, Paladin is actually looking to have probably the strongest set bonuses out of any of the tanks at the moment, which is a big contrast to the Nighthold set. Paladins have arguably the best raid utility in the game, and interesting ways to deal with certain boss mechanics through spells such as Blessing of Protection, Spell Warning, Bubble, Argent Defender. It's just a case of trying to determine how useful these abilities are, especially on the final fight of the raid tier where you're going to be spending most of your progress time, which is in this case kill Jhin, obviously. I mean, when I think about Paladin tanks, I consider them to be kind of like middle of the way, but with the opportunity to really shine if an encounter allows them to. I mean, overall, Paladin has strong mitigation, good self-healing, strong cooldowns, and a skilled Paladin definitely has the ability to bring a lot of raid support, probably more than most other tank classes. I mean, considering the use of things like Hand of the Protector being used to heal raid members or healing the off-tank and such. But, yeah, like I said, Paladin kind of feels like the middle of the way tank right now. It's definitely a very viable pick, but I think there are potentially better options. Moving up to tier 2, we have Blood DK. That's right, guys, let's get hyped. Finally, Blood DK is decent. So yeah, Blood DK is finally going to be a good tank for progress rating. Similar to Demon Hunter, it's receiving a big damage buff across all its abilities in the patch. However, the major buff for Death Knight actually comes in terms of the new artifact traits it's received. Like Carrion Feast, which increases the healing of Death Strike by 20%, combined with the new golden artifact trait, Soul Drinker, which increases maximum health by 50% of Death Strike overhealing, is huge. And with the other golden trait, the older one, called Unending Thirst, you have an additional 25% leech, and Death Strike damage is increased by 25% while the Blood Shield is up. So, not to forget also the new Vampiric Aura trait, which grants 20% leech for 15 seconds when consumption is used. I mean, all that probably sounded a little bit confusing, guys, but the TLDR is that a lot of the Death Knight artifact abilities intertwine with one another, and you're basically given a tank that has a ton of HP, decent passive damage reduction, a ton of self-healing and leech, and a large array of various cooldowns at your disposal. The new Blood Shield as well is like a mini Ignore Pain, and even though it's only physical damage that is absorbed, this is hardly a setback when we look at Tomb of Sargeras, and all the cooldowns available should pretty much handle any large magic damage that's incoming. So basically, yes, DK is still a mix of proactive and reactive tanking, but it's a lot sturdier and safer than it was before, and it's received some rather large buffs from previous raid tiers. I actually think we're going to be seeing a lot more Blood DK in raids in the current times, guys, which is obviously a good thing. Also in tier 2, we have the Druid. This is actually the first time since Legion Alpha, which started a year and a half ago, that Guardian Druid is arguably being knocked off the very top spot. The patch notes show rather large nerfs coming to the class, which really indicates just exactly how strong they were before, which I mentioned to you guys obviously in my previous videos. The now 3 charges of Frenzied Regen and the Tomb of Sargeras set bonuses being heavily focused on Frenzied Regen, which by the way it's weaker, they're weaker than Nighthold bonuses unfortunately, mean that Druid self-healing is about to go up quite a bit. Something Blizzard are already trying to negate via the mastery change, which no longer affects Frenzied Regen. The Iron Fur nerf was kind of expected and in line with the nerf that Blizzard previously introduced in patch 7.1.5, bringing it down to 80%. The way that the Druid class is designed probably isn't the best, and as our base item level and armor continues to go up, the scaling on Iron Fur needs to be tweaked, obviously. The other big change is, of course, the one that everyone's been talking about, Mark of the Ursul being removed, and yeah, it's caused obviously a lot of discussion over the last few months. My thoughts regarding it are that it isn't that big a deal. Nighthold has some very magic heavy encounters where yes, it was great, but I'm not really seeing any Star Augurs in Tomb of Sargeras, to be honest. And the intent, this is also an intent response from Blizzard, is that Druids should really be using the massive HP pool and then Frenzied Regen to reactively heal the magic damage. And if it is a really big attack, then it is to use one of the many Druid cooldowns available, which is fair enough, I guess. I really don't see Druid as being significantly weaker with the removal of Marker for the Ursul alone. What I am a little bit more concerned about is the rage generation nerfs that are coming through less Galactic Guardian procs, reduced rage from melee swings, especially when you consider the amount of rage that was being saved by the Nighthold set bonus, the 4 set. And we're potentially looking at, as a result of all this, we're potentially looking at less uptime, I guess you could say, on the 2+ stacks of Iron Fur here, which obviously means more incoming damage overall. I think it's going to be taking a little bit of getting used to for a lot of Guardian Druids having these rage nerfs, but then also losing the potential Nighthold's 4 set bonus. But all in all, I mean, Druid is Druid. I mean, it's still going to be a top tank, just that this patch is the first time it's been brought down to the level of the other tanks available. I mean, the king is dead. Long live the king. Okay, so that obviously leaves only one tank, guys, and last but not least, in the tier 1 spot, by a small margin, we have the Brewmaster Monk. And as mentioned, Brewmasters have received quite a few gameplay changes this patch. They have quite a few notes next to the name in regards to things. One of the big changes being the rebalance of how Brewmasters are going to be using their brews. And in line with this, there is the new limit for tanks in regards to the extension time of the active mitigation. They can only do it 3 times the base duration now, and this will obviously impact Brewmasters the most, as previously they were able to stack up a lot more Ironskin brew. It will make it more limiting and to use purifying brew when needed, and basically the playstyle of monks will have more attention in general as to how they use their brews after the patch, or during this patch. But to compensate, Brewmaster base damage reduction and dodge chance through a slight mastery buff, they've been increased. And overall, it might look like a lot of big changes in regards to this patch, but at the core, Brewmaster Monk will remain largely how it was before. It's going to be a tank able to take big hits while being excellent at smoothing incoming damage through Stagger and Purify. With Tomb of Sargeras looking to have a higher percentage of physical damage to magic in comparison to, say, for example, Nighthold, Monk is looking extremely strong right now. The high dodge chance is also proving to be exceptionally good for certain encounters in Tomb of Sargeras. No spoilers. And all in all, Monks started shining in Nighthold, but I think Tomb is where we're really going to see them excel as progress tanks. So to conclude, guys, let me make clear how close the tank balance is overall for the upcoming progress rating in Tomb of Sargeras. Despite me splitting these tanks into 4 tiers, each of these tiers are extremely close to one another. And I've tried to illustrate this to you guys in this graphic that I'm now showing on the video. If we compare this to the previous balance in the, pre-715 and after 715, you'll see that the tanks are actually really, really close balance-wise. This is the first time since Legion release that I honestly think the tank balance is actually really good from Blizzard, and that going into progress rating, you could pretty much play any of the tanks and they would be viable even at the highest level of rating. This rank list was my personal opinion with additional input from JustWait, my co-tanking method. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and throw the video a thumbs up. And let me know, guys, what you think in the comments below, and of course, have fun in the Tomb of Sargeras. Thanks, and see you guys on stream.